So, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Storytime. I'm very, very, very excited about this episode today, in that we have an international person on, someone that I've been a fan on since like before COVID. Maddy Brum, you might know her from Cheer on Netflix. Incredible athlete, incredible cheerleader, and she's agreed to be here today. So, Maddie, thank you so much for being here. This is amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, I have so many questions
Yay.
just in general for you, but where it all starts for me, we'll get into childhood and why cheerleading and kind of going into that. The videos that yourself and a few of like your colleagues, like friends and stuff post are insane. So like the math doesn't math for me with cheerleading, if that makes any sense, right? Like
It does, yes.
how like okay, getting into it, how do you start this journey of knowing how to do this? Like,
It's actually kind of insane because when you start cheerleading, like you think of it as first as like just being like a cheerleader, usually as a child. Like you're like, oh yeah, I want to go and do cartwheels with my friends and back walkovers and like little things that are like somersaults, things that like you would do with your friends for fun. And then you start getting more interested in it, and then you get really good at your cartwheel. Okay, now I want to get a back walkover. Okay, I get really good at my back walkover. But then as you get older, it's just the want to like be great at it keeps getting more because you like come at peace with yourself with gaining a skill that you never even thought you could do before. And then it just makes you like, oh, I got a back handspring. Now I wonder if I could add a tuck onto that after. And then all of a sudden you're just catching yourself like flipping over and over and over again with a bunch of new things.
it's
So
my
it's fun.
it's my favorite thing to hear people like yourself who are like at the top of their game explain how they do what they do. They're just like, like one morning I woke up and I was just like, I really, really do a handstand. So now I do triple cartwheel backflips. And I'm like, how does that even like
Right. And
equate?
it's crazy because that's where it starts. Like you start with the obsession of just like being a part of cheerleading. Like it's not even just like the flipping. Like I also was once a gymnast, but I liked cheerleading more because I thought it was cool that like other girls were holding girls up in the air. Like I wanted to do that. But then you see as you get older and as like it gets more competitive and you start getting more competitive, you're like, oh wait, like she has like two girls holding one girl on top of her who has a girl on top of her. I wonder if we can do that. Like I hope I can do that one day. And so that's really where cheer is, and like the mindset, I feel like, in the perspective of it, because that's how what every time I watch someone do it, it made me want to do it more.
Yeah, it's kind of like you took dancing and gymnastics and when we're just going to combine them and then you're all going to catch each other at the same time.
Right. Yeah,
That's
and a little bit of acro too, because we have stunting and stuff like that in it. So it's like they really mixed all of the three, which is cool.
it's incredible. So a lot of the teammates that you do a lot of performance with, a lot of the cheer with, we also become fans of everyone and try to understand what the different in my monkey brain and like what the different positions are throughout the team. So if you had to kind of like break that down, like how does structure work of a team of cheerleaders, and is there a set structure?
Well, I mean, the way cheerleading works, I guess it's based off of the division and what who is on your team, because in our sport we can have boys on our teams, and then it goes off of how many boys that you have. Like I'm competing at nationals with only, I think we're having like 8 girls and 12 boys on the floor. Like there's more boys on the mat that are going to be competing than their girls are. And I might be completely off with those numbers, but there are teams, like especially on Team USA, because I also have the opportunity to compete with them too. And we have, right, America, and we have people who are men, grown men, who, and there's like 12 of them to 15, and then there's less females. So it's like crazy how like diverse cheerleading has become. And it also comes from like there's a small co-ed where like boys can be on the teams, but there can be 3 people in one group holding someone up, where like on my team only one person holds us up. And then there's all girls where it's just all females on the teams holding the girls up. And that's like the amount of numbers that they're allowed to have. So, and then those people, whatever teams have that amount of people in them, will all compete against each other. So it's fair, if that makes sense at all.
Can you do no, you're explaining it beautifully.
Okay.
Can you do all three, or do you kind of like pick a division and that's your division?
You usually, well, you pick, usually you go off of, so like, for example, when I came to Texas Tech, I knew that they were a large co-ed school. So that means that there's going to be specifically probably co-ed stunting on those teams where it's one girl and one boy. So that's my knowledge, and that's what I've trained to get good at. I originally, when I started cheerleading, did group stunting where it was um, a back spot, a main base, a side base, and a flyer, which is a group stunt. And then now I go to co-ed stunting, which is just a stunner and a flyer. So I started with group stunts, and then I ended up being in these ones. So you can pick like what you want to train with. And then I think based off of like whatever college or wherever cheer program you want to cheer with, that's based off of like, okay, then I will go and work with them. That's collegiate. There's also a whole other industry in cheerleading called all-star cheerleading. And the UK actually has many teams who are in all-star cheerleading who travel here for competitions, like the World Championship, Summit, NCA, which is like held in Dallas every year. And it's basically a whole separate world where there's hundreds of thousands of people who cheer for programs like just like little gyms all over the world, and they all are on a bunch of teams. And then the levels go like you can be level 1 all the way up to level 7. And then you can start at whatever level your gym owners think you're at or your coaches, and then you move up. And then once you become a senior in high school and you graduate, you move on to the collegiate world, which is just cheering in college. So there's high school cheer, there's all-star cheer, there's college cheer, there's
Wow.
multiple different kinds. It's a whole different type of world. But since it's not like considered a sport, it is just a whole separate world that honestly a lot of people don't know about. Like a lot of my engagement on social media is from cheerleaders, from people who cheer. And it is such a big community, because think of it as like, imagine all of the towns like you live, like all the towns that are near you. Imagine like every single one of them having a cheer team.
Yeah. It's a
And
lot
then
of
imagine
people.
that times 1,000, if more, so it's crazy. But people find cheerleading all over the world like that.
It's so competitive, and obviously cheer gave us a little bit of that insight into what it is that the guys and girls of the sport, I'm going to call it a sport, to me it's a sport, um, go through,
Plus,
just in terms of the physicality, the injuries, the kind of team dynamic of it. I mean, the trust that you need to have in the person standing below you, throwing you four or
right,
5 meters into the air is insane. Um,
right,
so you would go high school into college, which you said there was also the pairing of all star, which then
yes.
goes to collegiate, you said?
Yeah, so basically, well, like from my thing, I cheered for my town. When I was like a little girl, it's basically rec. Like, I don't know if you know what rec cheer or anything is, but it's basically like I am from a small town called Drigget, and we have a Pop Warner program, which is like a rec program where people who live in that town get to play football, American football,
Yeah.
and get to be a cheerleader. And it's all like, it doesn't cost any money. It's nonprofit. It's just for kids in the like towns to get together and start getting into sports and stuff like that. And that's where I started. Then I moved to the All-Star program, which is ECE, which was like 25 minutes where I was from. I didn't even really know what it was. And I went and I started doing it. And then it was like my little town cheer times like 50. And there was like 50 teams. And then a bunch of, imagine like 20 girls on like all 10 teams that I got to walk around. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And then you get to travel around the country, usually from like February until April, and you compete at competitions all against each other. And so I did that up until my senior year, which where I graduated, went to Navarro. And then when I graduated from Navarro, I transferred to Texas Tech and was still doing collegiate cheerleading, just at a different university.
And does the jump from where you are now, I apologize if this is a stupid question, but just trying to
No.
understand industry, where you are now, do you go like, I know that like all the big sports within the US have these huge cheerleading divisions as well. Do you jump to that, or is that a different style or side of the industry?
That's actually a great question. So when it comes to collegiate cheerleading, there's two styles of cheerleading, and there's the one that you see from Navarro, which is like jumps, you have the dance, you have the tumbling, you have like the fast pace, like go, 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 go. And then there's, which is like NCA, which is NCA College, which we go to Daytona. And then there's UCA. And me and Alex, my stunt partner, actually had the opportunity to go and compete partner stunt, which you can just compete with you and your partner against all of the other universities who
Wow.
qualified to make it into the competition. And we ended up getting third place, which was really exciting because we have never done it before. Right. And we
Well
were,
done.
thank you, thank you. And it was very exciting because you go like, it's cheerleading is such a team sport, and then you go and you do it by yourself and you're like, this is a lot different. I don't have my team yelling for me and all of that. But UCA style is like mostly strictly like stunts, like the difficulty, like they harp on the difficulty, they harp on the technique, not as much flashiness. They don't jump like when we jump and like hit our legs up in the air. They don't dance. They don't do that really. But they have very, very more intense, a lot harder, most of the time, a lot harder cheerleading routines to do. But the thing is, it's a very different type. I
Mm.
can't necessarily say one is harder than the other because I've never done UCA personally. Schools like that, they're just different schools. Usually the coaches can pick what type of cheerleading they want to choose to. It's almost like dance when the coaches will pick what style of dance that they want them to go and
Okay.
compete. It's the same
Okay.
exact thing for cheerleading, except it's what instead of being able to pick more than one division, you pick one type of style and you try to do it to the best of your ability.
Wow. Okay. So cheerleading in the style that you do it can exist outside of college, university, that time of life, right? Like you can take this
Yes.
forever and always until you kind of want to stop, right?
I mean, so unfortunately, I wish, but the way it works is when I graduate from Texas Tech, I'm done competing at that competition. I'm not allowed. I can't find another way because when you get a certain amount of years of eligibility, which means you are only allowed to compete at the competition for a certain amount of years on the mat. So maximum is 5 years, but since COVID, we didn't have 2020 and 2021 didn't fully count because a lot of schools had a travel ban. So technically, people who have been in college since like 2019 didn't actually get any eligibility years until 2022. 2022, I started college in 2020 and I technically still have, I competed 22 and 23. So I still have, no, yeah, 22 and 23. So I still have this year and next year, the year after, and the year after.
And then, okay, it's a very far forward question because I get asked this kind of thing a lot, like, "What's next?" And you're like, "I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow." Um,
Right.
what is your? Because I mean, you've built this like celebrity level following into what it is that you do, which is incredible to see. A lot of our friends that are athletes, it becomes a balance between I'm an incredible athlete and I'm really good at my job, but at the same time, I have to build this sort of presence with who I am as a person, the knowledge that I have, the personality that I have, to then
Mhm.
carry that out further, which you've successfully done. What for you has started to stand out amongst the sport of cheerleading that you go, oh, but I also actually enjoy this side of it, maybe working with Netflix open some doors for you. Like, how do
Mhm.
you look forward into the future to where you can take it?
Um, that's actually a great question. I have been so blessed with so many opportunities that cheerleading has given me that's beyond of what any of our sport could ever expect. And those are things that I take like, and I look at them and I'm like, how, like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this has never happened before. Is this me that's having this happen? And it's so cool that like we're making these opportunities happen. And I think for me and like my goal for cheerleading as a whole, like I like I said, I'm on Team USA. And after Team USA, usually though, there's not much people do outside of the sport besides coach all of those all-star teams or the college teams that I was just telling you about, because we all love it so much. And I think ever since cheer came out, I've been given so many cool opportunities that has been able to push cheerleading past just a cheerleading perspective.
Mm.
And for that, I'm very grateful. And I think that's what I want to just keep doing is create the understanding of like that cheerleading is very difficult. And it doesn't just take like pom poms and a sign for us to be considered good at what we do. And some people still think like that. And then some people will say, like, okay, we get it, it's hard, but it still can't be a sport. It's not a sport. And I don't care if it's a sport or not. That's not what I'm trying to do. I don't care if it's a part of the performance industry, but I want it to be something that's recognized than more of what it is. And I think that we are reaching those, us as the cheerleading community as a whole is reaching to that every single day. Like something new is happening. Like this past October, me and a few others got the opportunity to be on Dancing with the Stars
Sick.
and do a cheerleading themed dance. And it was the first time cheerleading has ever been brought to a famous live television ballroom. Like that's something huge for our sport.
What? That's amazing.
And it's exciting. It really is. Like it's so exciting to see that like people think of cheerleading when it comes to, we want it to be entertainment because that's what it is. And I think that if people really think outside of the box when it comes to it, great things can happen for it. And it takes a lot of grit. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of it's a mentally challenging physical thing to do. And people don't look at it that way. And they think and it's not because, and maybe it's because they think that their school isn't one of those schools, but it doesn't mean that it's still not difficult. And I think that's where a lot of people lose like the respect for what we do, because they think that, oh, well, if you can do like, oh, all this team's doing is, oh, you didn't win. Oh, this team's only doing cartwheels and you won. Like, woo, it's like, okay, but it's still physically demanding. It's still something that is hard. And I think that we all start somewhere. And I think cheerleading is one of those sports that really teaches people who they like, how they want to be. And I won't say that there isn't some bad things in cheerleading. There is, and there's things in this community that need to be fixed, but there's things in all communities that I think need to be fixed.
Mm.
So my biggest passion for it, I really think, is to just like keep like working. And I want to keep cheerleading until I physically cannot anymore, because I've worked like way too hard to get to where I am now. But I also want others to see that like they can also push and make changes in the industry, like because the things that have happened to me, all of the opportunities, the shows, the cheer show, the talk shows I've been on, even this podcast right now, like these little opportunities for me are huge, but people think that it's so far out of their reach because they're in cheer and that it just happened, but like I didn't think it was going to happen to me. So I guess I just really want that for others. Like I want people, like I want the next generation of cheerleaders to have the opportunities that I had, so cheerleading can keep growing. But sometimes it's hard because the industry can be very opinionated, because we are such a small community and people have their opinions on things, and then the community takes over. So then it's kind of hard to find that balance of what people agree with, people's opinions on things. Everyone knows everyone. It's like insane.
Yeah. It's like two things that I really want to give you credit on in listening to you speak is it's the best feeling in the world to be extremely passionate about something, because I don't think a lot of people in the world know, or at least have ever been given the privilege of knowing what their calling is, or like knowing what their purpose is. And there's people that are so good at what they do that it starts becoming unselfish. It starts becoming, it's about the craft, or it's about the sport, or it's about the art, and it's about the people that do it. And there's a passionate like defensiveness that you build for the thing that you love. And you speak about it in that way, which is such an like it gets me stoked about cheerleading, and I'm not even in it. But
Good.
and it's to continue doing that, it's impossible that there won't be change, because I think people not only resonate with, someone might know nothing about cheerleading, but they know what it feels like to love something, or they know what it feels like to want to be really good at something. And people will pick that up before they pick up, oh, wow, I love this sport that I've just heard of, or this new art that I've just found. Like, people relate to people first off because we can emote on the same level, right? And we
Right.
speak about it very, very passionately, which is like it's so sick to hear that.
Oh,
And what I remember watching it through both seasons, season one, season two, and watching it being like, if we had this here, it's no bullshit. If we had it here, like, I'm so in. You get to like throw
right.
people in the air and like do dope stunts and shit. Like, coolest thing ever.
Right.
And it was so eye-opening because, like, from an immature point of view, yeah, people like myself and tons of other people going like, oh, cheerleading, like it's dope, but it's cheerleading. And then you
It's
watch the
cheerleading.
show and
Right.
you were like, oh shit, this is so much bigger than just like what I thought it was. It's
Right.
kind of athletes, you know, doing their craft. And like I say, it's a mix of so many different styles that you've kind of brought in. So you'd
Right.
spent so much time perfecting this craft and perfecting the sport of cheerleading. And then Netflix step in, and we're seeing them do it a lot now with they did it with golf, they did it with the F1, and Drive to Survive is blowing up and it's this huge thing.
Hmm.
And how did things change for you, not within your personal life, because I mean we can get into, but we can also see that you've taken on all these incredible ventures now as well. But how did it change the way that you viewed what you do? Did it become more difficult? Was it weird to kind of have cameras following? Did it create more drama? Like, how did things change for you?
Definitely made things a lot more difficult, especially because when I was joining Navarro, that is not what I knew I was signing up for
Mm.
until the day I was going to fully commit to the program. And I was like, okay, well, I guess this is what we're doing. It didn't really seem real. And there were times, I can't lie, like the cameras and stuff were a lot. And I even think the pressure, like the cameras could have been a lot. And the times like when we wanted to focus on ourselves, it was hard to sometimes. And I think it also came with for me personally, I think it was harder on me because there were times where I I had just moved across the country like not even 5 months before, away from my family, 18 years old, and got told I was going to be a main character on a Netflix show. And it was going to be a documentary, so I had to be myself. And I was having a heart attack. And I didn't wanted to make sure I wasn't saying the wrong things. I got so like stressed in the beginning of it, and then I think I got to a point, especially since COVID happened and then they came back,
Yeah.
and I think I got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to start being like, I realized like I put so much pressure on myself to be great. And I felt like when you compete in cheerleading, you only feel that real ounce of adrenaline and pressure for 2 minutes and 30 seconds or 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Depends which type of cheerleading you do.
Okay.
And that adrenaline rush is unlike any other adrenaline rush I've had in my life. Like every time, like people thrive for that moment, that 2 minutes. Like we kill ourselves, do all of these things for literally 2 whole minutes, 2 times, guaranteed 2 times. And it's insane because we could go out and one time we can mess up. And that happened with me in my season. Like my team went out and we had a mistake and we didn't end up winning, but that's like what it's all about. It's like the adrenaline of not knowing and only having 2 minutes to figure out if it's going to be. So um I think when it came down to me and like that pressure of just thinking of like, oh, I've never competed at Daytona, this is my first time in college, I'm moving so far away from home, I have a microphone on me
Yes.
100% of the time. And I didn't really know, I kind of lost myself a little bit, I can't lie. I think that I got really, I just always wanted to be great. I always wanted to be the person in the room that people would watch. I always wanted to be the best cheerleader in the room. I've been born with a competitive mindset, and that's how I always took things. And I think, like, especially times on the show where I had my growing moments where I was like, oh, maybe I'm not like the best athlete in the room, and times where I was at my weakest moments, those were shown. And I'm thankful for it. Would I go back and change it? Absolutely not, because it's something that definitely taught me how to grow and taught me what I wanted to be. And I think moving forward with it, especially in cheerleading, I realized that as I got more recognition, as I got better from that point where when I was on the show and I was learning still, and I did put all of that pressure on myself, and seeing where I've come since then as well has been definitely also an emotional roller coaster, because I will look and I feel like I have a huge fan base, a bunch of people that count on me, a bunch of people that I want to make proud. And I care about them because I was once that little girl. Like,
Mm.
I wanted to be a cheer celebrity so bad as a child. Like, then that's what we call them,
Really?
a cheer celebrity.
A
Because in our small,
cheerlebrity. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
because in our cheerleading community, if you were known in your community, that means you were great at what you did, because the community was small. So if you managed to get known throughout the community, that was where a lot of the recognition would come. And it was always something that I just always wanted. I always wanted to be that girl in the room that people would watch and be like, who is that? She's good. I want to be like her. And the fact that I feel that from people, it started with pressure, but now it's a privilege to me. And like seeing how much the kids like look up to me, or if like I see a child and she's like on the verge of tears and she's like going to compete at competition that day, like those little things, it's like
Yeah.
I know that she sees the future like the way that I did, and it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. So I really like doing it because I think it's been really cool seeing like the growth of myself from the show, seeing like turning it from so much pressure to like keep being great, make sure you're always on your toes, make sure you're always being Maddy, and always making sure that this picture perfect image of everyone that everyone has of you stays. And it's like, no one's perfect. There's going to be times where I fail, there's going to be times where I might do something wrong, but in the end of the day, it's like people fell in love and people learned to like who I was as a person on the show. And now it's weird because I'm 22 and that show was filmed when I was 18. So it's like people come up to me and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I love you on Cheer, like I just watched it. And I'm like, oh, that was
It's a
4 years ago.
it's a weird feeling, right? Like I've had the same feeling with the kissing booth for like the longest time. And you know, you can do multiple international or local projects to get something to blow up to the point that kissing booth did is very,
Right.
very, very difficult. Um,
Right.
and it was the second job I'd ever done. I'd only ever done one film before that one, and granted, yes, my role wasn't, you know, massively big. Regardless, you know, we all were along for the ride on that one. And yeah, again, huge blessing. But like the reason I ask you that kind of question is just that the mental games that I went through for, you know, two,
Mhm.
3 years afterwards of dealing with all of it, like the imposter syndrome, you know, of being like, do I deserve to be here? Did I
Right.
do enough to be here? And then, you know, kind of the fear of losing everything. Can I keep it going? Can I keep it up?
Yes.
You know, and then it
Hmm.
goes away because things like that ebb and flow throughout life, but it goes away and you're like, oh shit, I'm failing, you know, because like
Right.
everything's going away and then it picks up again and you're like, oh, I'm the shit again, you know, like
Right.
that like those highs and lows are just so
So
difficult
true.
mentally. And same for me, like, you know, we shot Kissing Booth 5 years ago, 5 years ago. To have people now say to me like, "Hey, you're from the Kissing Booth," I'm like, "Yeah, I was the guy." You know, like it's a weird
Right.
headspace to get myself around, and like I can't watch anything that I'm in. Um, it really starts freaking me out now, especially because the penny
Right.
dropped for me where I was like, "Oh, we have actual evidence of who I was throughout these years, you know, and
Right.
like where I was as a headspace. The difference is I get to kind of hide in a character. You guys are you the entire time, you know, like I could say something maybe a little bit offside and everyone's like, oh, but it's the character, you know, like
Right.
Whereas for you guys, you say something offside and everyone's like, oh, I don't know if I would have done that, like, and people
Right.
just are that way inclined. So,
Yeah, like a perfect example is there's a scene in the show where I got taken off of the mat, and it was literally like not taken off of the mat, I got taken out of the air. I was a flyer, and I got taken out of the air because I wasn't doing my job, which is like part of what cheerleading is. My stunt was not hitting. I got taken out of the air. I have learned from that now. I've grown from that. But in that moment, I was heartbroken. Like I
mm,
remember feeling like such a pain that I couldn't even control. And I was embarrassed because I couldn't even hold back how upset I was. And the show also like portrays things in different ways too, where it's like you're not portraying a show, you're portraying a situation that actually happened that people have opinions about.
yes.
And I think when it came down to that, like so many of people in the world had an opinion about how upset I was when I got taken out of the air, and that how I shouldn't act like that, and I should know better, and that all of these things. But like they didn't know the behind the scenes facts of like the fact that if I got taken out of the air and someone gets put in, then someone has to get taken off of the floor. And that person who got taken off the floor happened to be one of my bestest friends. And that wasn't included in the show. But those are things that
Hey,
are left out that like I was so upset about and I was so taken back by. And then when I went back and watched it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I look like such a brat. And like, did I look bratty in that moment, even with the context that was there? Absolutely. But there's details and things that get left out because it only is such a long documentary series that people think they know what they're talking about when they
mm,
don't.
mm,
And that was like a time where I was literally at my most like vulnerable, upset state. And I was so upset with myself. And right when it happened, I knew they were going to put it in. And it's just little things like that because then the anxiety of the situation doesn't just take control. The anxiety of what's going to happen in the show starts taking control. And I'm
a
like,
thousand
oh
percent.
my gosh, I hope that they don't make me look insane and I hope that people don't. But in the end of the day, it's how I felt in that moment. And like I said earlier, there was a time that I had to hit and realize that like there's nothing, I can't like try and filter myself for the next two
Yeah.
years. Like I can only be unapologetically me and hope that people love me for that. Does that come with like my northernness and a little bit of bitchiness and a little bit of like my opinion about things and I'm gonna say how I feel? Yes. And but in the end of the day, like I'm okay with that. And that's something that took me a while to understand is like the pressure that I would put on myself to make everyone else still know I was me. I let that go, and it took me a while to let go. But the people who know me and my real supporters are gonna stand by me at my truest times. And I think that was something that I really learned, especially after the show being over. And there was a lot of scandals and things that had happened post show with with the program and with people
Mm,
involved in the team, and it had nothing to do with me. But in the end of the day, that's still a representation of who I am, and people who are in my life are going to stay and people who aren't. But
mm,
I've learned just like a lot about who like I want to be through those ups and downs that you were talking about. And I love that you can relate to that because it's so true. Like especially like feeling like, oh, like I hope I'm not just like giving up an opportunity that I had, or like should I have done more with what I had. And I had that for a while. Like I felt like I was losing it. And it's because, and I didn't go and attack anything because I was so worried about everyone else's opinions instead of just doing like what I wanted to do. And if
mm,
I worried more about like what I wanted to do, I feel like I wouldn't have had so much anxiety about if it was the right or wrong decision.
mm.
So that's something that definitely taught me a lot through this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's people are like attracted to the idea of watching people be people. Granted, it's people at their peak of whatever it is that they do. So it's exceptional human beings, but we watch it because we want to watch people. And then
Right.
you react like a person, and people are like, shouldn't do that,
Right.
which is,
How dare you? I'm like, okay.
like, how was I supposed to take it? Smile and pretend like everything's okay. Then people would have
Right.
commented and been like, ah, this girl's fake. She's pretending.
Right.
Oh,
Ungrateful.
well, exactly.
Like,
Oh, she clearly doesn't care. Like, so every situation is going to have a negative and a positive to it, right? Like
right.
there really is no right answer. And because there is no right answer, all you can do is just do what you think and how you feel in the moment, right? Like,
Right.
never apologize for how you feel on something. That's just silly. You can apologize for reactions and actions, but never apologize for how you
Right.
feel. That's just
Feel.
crazy.
Right.
Um, so cheer does extremely well, and it took off. I mean, I think Cheer and Drive to Survive were the two sports documentary shows that were like at the forefront of kind of like running everything. Looking back at the 2 seasons of the show, what moments for you do you now, looking back and watching it, what moments stand out for you that maybe at the time, I mean, you're so in the zone of, trying to win and doing what you do. What moments do you look back at now that kind of freeze frame for you and you're like, oh, that was actually quite special to have?
Um, that's a good question. I think even like it's cool because the fact that I have like such a life changing, like whether there was a camera or not, I think my experience being in Texas for 2 whole years straight out of being in Massachusetts, which is like very different culture, very different lifestyle. I think even just being there and having that on film that I can just like go on Netflix and watch and having like that experience, even like just the bare minimum moments, it's special for me to have because I know that not many people get to have those. And it's really cool that I get to keep going back and watching it. And then I learn a lot about like the experiences that we had together. We learned so much about Navarro and like, I think the friends that I've created there, like, Morgan, do you know Morgan Seminar, Morgan from the show?
Yes. Yes.
Um, she had recently just got married. I was just in her wedding and I met
That's
her at Navarro two
incredible.
years ago. So it's cool because like, I think those, it's weird, but the moments, the fact that I wasn't doing it alone, the fact that crazy things were happening for us and it what didn't really make any sense because it doesn't. The fact that cheerleading like ended up on TV was like
Yeah.
the most like unknown thing ever, so we were all just kind of like going with it and then like going back and watching it after. There's things that we don't like that we loved about it, obviously, like the seeing my experience within my teammates, like seeing how like bonded we were and seeing like them like when they would come into our dorm rooms and like film us just hanging out in our dorm. Like no one really gets that in the real world here. Like you don't get to just see your whole entire first year of college experience like from your bedroom to your practice gym firsthand. And I think that it's cool because now those people, since we have those moments together and we can go back and see them, it's another reason why we're all so close because it's something we bonded with together and we can go back and look at that. And like Morgan too, when she was getting really big, she was getting really big because of season one started. And me and her, like I was watching her like and she was looking at me like, girl, this is about to happen to you. And I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. Like I don't
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
don't know. And she was like, I'm gonna help you. Like this is not normal for us, remember that. But those things make us closer. So I think it was almost like the moments that you look back on the show of us like bonding about the little things or even knowing like there was things that were totally like we had to like act or like we'd say something and then they'd come back and they'd be like, hey, can you say that again? And we'd be
Of
like,
course. Of course. Yeah.
and I'd be like, I'm not an actress. Like you came to film me in real time. I'm not an actress. And so we would do it and then we would go back and watch and we'd be like, oh, they told us to say that. And like little things like that, I think are
Yeah.
another really cool thing too. Just like seeing like they would come into my house at like 9 o'clock in the morning and would film me making breakfast before practice. And I would be like, so I think even just like going back and like, I feel like I remember almost every single moment that they would use. I think my biggest thing is I want to see the footage that they have that they didn't
That
use
they
because
Okay. I'm so glad you say that because we have the same feeling like on a set where you do
right,
10 takes and you're like, I kind of want to see the other ones, like
right,
let me in on that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right. Because there's things that were in season two. Season two, definitely personally for me, I felt like it became more about the team and about the people and less about the athleticism in the sport. And that just comes with it being about the characters and the
Yeah.
characters being on the show prior. I know that. But I think that that's kind of where things took a turn. And there was things that we went back and watched season 2 and we were like, oh, it's gonna be like I wonder what badass cheerleading that of us that they're gonna put on the show. And then we went back and then it's like just drama and like cheerleading. But like we also lost nationals that year, so it wasn't very like a rewarding ending, if that makes sense. But I can always look back on that though and know that that's something that like I can watch my like most heartbreaking loss in cheerleading right in front of my face, but I'm thankful for it in a way because I will always go back and watch it and remember how angry and how upset I was that day and how much I never wanted to have that feeling again.
Yeah.
And without the show, I wouldn't have that, like to that detail, to like the feelings of like the tears, like the details behind everything was just like I can relive it again. And but at the same time, that next year, the year later that they didn't film, all of those people came back, or most of those people came back, and we won nationals. But I think since the show, right, like yes, like we came back from it, and watching us fail on national TV was something that maybe we needed to like help us keep going. You know, it's like it's a check-in, it's humbling, it's all of those things. It's like, yay, we were on national television, but you lost on national television, so you got to keep going.
Like bittersweet.
So it was very bittersweet. And I think me seeing like me hug like some of my closest friends when we did lose and like being able to hug them again when we won, like those little things, it's like that's what makes me very grateful. I'm so grateful for those little things that the things that I got to see, the way that they did put it all out. I was like, I am going to remember the moments where when I was at my lows, did they need to maybe show all of them? No, there's other footage that they totally could have put in. But I'm thankful to see them and I'm thankful to grow from them because they're not going anywhere. So it is what it is, you know? So at times it was like hard. I mean, I did like, especially in the show, I told a lot about my personal life. I told a lot about my family. I told a lot about like where I come from. And then I realized that once it starts getting out into the real world, then everyone knows your real life. And people start acting like they really know your life. And I think that's where I would also start getting like a little bit frustrated with it because I will always take the support. I love support. I'm grateful for it always. But I think when people start talking because they all saw the same episode that has to do with my home life, that's not all that there is to me. So I think that was definitely something that was really hard for me too. Like I did get out of my comfort zone because I told myself I was going to, and I told myself if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be all in and I'm going to tell it how it is, whether it hurts some people's feelings or not, because this was my experience and I was young and I was ruthless for it. If I had the same thing happen to me now, I might not give out all of the personal details of my life, but at the same time, I'm thankful that I did at that age because that's what I set for myself. I'm going to leave it all on the table. I'm going to be unapologetically me. But at the same time, it's like those things, like I told you earlier, now everyone knows my life story and that's okay. But I wouldn't be where I am without that.